wanting us to understand what life is all about. And it's not always so cheerful that essentially we're born, we live, life is hard, and we die. And obviously there's a lot of things that happen in between, and there's a lot of very meaningful things that happen in between. But if we miss the part where God has created us to pursue Him and have communion with Him, if we miss that part, that life can be quite melancholy. We could find ourselves staring at a well-dressed desk toy and talking about having existential conversation. Because if you remove God from our lives, you remove all meaning and purpose and everything that is to live on this earth. And as the writer of Ecclesiastes says, it is life under the sun. That's how he describes it. He introduces us to this world that is hevel. This word means that when we say that life is hevel, life is meaningless. It is empty. It is like a vapor. It is like a wisp that we chase after. It is fleeting. And so he wants us to understand, how do we, as followers of Yahweh, how do we live in a life that is full of hevel? What should our life look like? Our choices will either make us more human or less human. And this is how God has created us. He has created us uniquely in His image, and He has invited us into a relationship with Him. And what Jesus desires for our lives is that Jesus would become formed in us, and that would bring all the meaning into our lives. And essentially, how we become more and more human is to be more and more like Christ. And the more that we ignore that in our lives, the more that we pursue the world, and the more that we focus ourselves on the world, essentially we become less and less human. We become more like animals. Starting in verse 1. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him the power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to that one place? Verse 7. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. And that if we do not make the right choices in stewarding this appetite, in shepherding this appetite, our lives can be destroyed, and we can fall into a dangerous, dangerous trap. And this is what the writer is wanting to get through to us, that we have to be very, very careful, because our bodies, our lives, our souls have a lot of different appetites. What makes us more human is having Christ formed in us. And if we remove that, we become just like this rat running around this maze of life, wanting more and more and more, and wanting to establish habit of craving in our lives. That empty, God-sized hole in our soul will run through that maze until we find what our soul craves. And our soul craves our Creator. It craves Jesus. It craves a relationship with Him. And until we find that, until we find fulfillment in that, we're going to run through the maze of life and we are going to be empty. And I think of this phrase, being enemies of the cross of Christ. And it reminds me that we can even endeavor in healthy things, But if we're not finding our complete meaning and fulfillment in Jesus, that we can miss the boat, even in really good things that we're doing. That even here in this wonderful place, that if we are not finding our fulfillment completely in Jesus, we can become disappointed. But to be fully human, it requires more than just bodily desires. It requires transformation. And what happens so many times is we think of ourselves as being these creatures of where we just desire and thirst for more and more and more, but actually, so many times our thirsts are too narrow. God has given us desires. God has given us inspiration. He has given us motivation. And so many times what we're guilty of is not really so much desiring more and more, it's we're guilty of having our desires being too narrow. We're guilty of just having desires in the wrong places. God desires for us to really kind of open the floodgates of the ability and the gifting that He has given us to go and flood out into the world and overflow out into the world of this calling that He has on our lives.